So this is a project that's taken me about 20 years of research. And next. It started when I was a kid. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay region, East Bay, and I always as a kid would walk around on these hills and wonder in the city, Berkeley, Oakland, San Francisco, what was this place like before all the sidewalks and before all the trees and the cars? And I began to try to imagine these grassy hills with oaks, and you might have seen trails, wildlife trails through bunch grasses. You might have seen a coast live oak with a big rub from a grizzly, because grizzlies, they like to rub their backs against trees, boulders. Next. And there was one creek. This is Wildcat Creek, which is in Tilden Regional Park behind the Oakland-Berkeley Hills. And I used to go there every weekend after school just to hike, cross the same place. And I began to see changes that were deeper in time than just winter and summer, the dry season, the rainy season. And it got me curious. I saw cycles of time that were, you could only see for every 10 years. There was a drought. These are little oil paintings I did. This top right is a year when Wildcat Creek didn't flow all year. It was dry, even in the winter, we barely got rain. And I wondered, where did all the little fish go? Then, for people who grew up in at least Central California in 1998-99, we had a huge El Nino. And that year, the lower right, Wildcat Creek flooded monstrously. It was bigger than I'd ever seen it during any winter flood. It took out buildings, sidewalks. There was a little bridge that went over the creek, took that out. And then when I crossed the creek after the floodwaters subsided, the creek bed had been dug 2 feet down. Next. So this is where I grew up. Kensington, Oakland, Berkeley Hills. This is a picture I took today. The street, cars, looking out towards Mount Tamalpais. Next. And this is an oil painting I did, trying to imagine what the same place looked like 200 years ago. It was a bunch grassland with meadowlarks. That's the Golden Gate before the bridge. San Francisco would have been on that peninsula. Next. I would have imagined walking among purple needlegrass bunches on these ridges, the stems blowing in the sea breezes. Next. And if I had gone down to the Albany mudflats by the bay, I might have seen this, grizzlies. This is actually based on a description in the Monterey Bay in the 1800s. Somebody actually saw a scene like this where a beached whale had a hole in the side of it and grizzlies were actually going inside to feed. Next. Now I admit San Francisco was a little hard to imagine what this scene right there on Nob Hill, looking east, how that appeared 200 years ago. That was hard. But after going around looking at historical documents, even old oil paintings from the 1800s, some vacant lots, old photographs, this is how I imagined it. Next. The same scene. 200 years ago, elk antlers perhaps dropped, blue blossom ceanothus bunch grasses. Coit Tower would have been on that hill, and downtown Market Street would have been on that mudflat. All the tall buildings. Next. Oakland. This is Lake Merritt today, a photograph I took. And next, what was it like in the past? Lake Merritt was actually a saltwater inlet of the bay. And Oakland, of course, was named for all the coast live oaks. Next. This is an area I grew up in a lot, El Cerrito Plaza and the East Bay, north of Berkeley. Just a big mall right now with who knows what was under that cement. Notice this is Albany Hill covered with, I believe it's blue gum eucalyptus. And what was it like in the past? A grassland with scattered coast live oaks, no eucalyptus on the hill, of course. And I imagine grizzly bears coming to feed on fallen acorns. Next. And then moving into the Central Valley, this is near Fresno, the Friant Dam, which today blocks the San Joaquin River, which went deep into the southern Sierra Nevada. What was it like in the past? Next. A long, free-flowing river full of salmon. Next. This is how I try to reconstruct a particular spot, like in a city. This is Santa Barbara. So I went and took pictures of the Mission. This was a couple years ago. And then I tried to line up an oil painting exactly with the same horizon, the same hills, and this painting is from the same spot that I took the photograph, but imagined. And this was pretty easy to imagine because, of course, the Spanish missionaries came and described this spot very well so that they could put their mission there. They described tall grasses the size of a man on a horse that came up to the saddle horn. Those grasses still grow in the area, giant wild rye. And coast live oaks would have dotted this plain. Next. And near here, San Fernando Valley, I hiked up these hills just to see what sort of relict plants still live on the edges of the city. And this is the great thing about anyone can do this. You can find any little tiny lot in a city and there could be native plants there, or even if they're not native plants, there could still be clues to the past. So how did this area look in the past? Next. Grizzlies. San Fernando Valley was a vast plain, and it was interesting, 2 nights ago I gave a talk to the Native Plant Society, and afterwards a man came up to me and said, my grandmother grew up in San Fernando Valley and painted it, and she said there were no trees. So that was a really nice, I'm always trying to get evidence that these paintings are accurate, so that was good to hear. Apparently it was a treeless grassland full of wildflowers. Next. So how do I reconstruct these oil paintings, which is the basis for the book? I do a lot of field work in the cities. You can walk around any sidewalk and sooner or later you're going to hit clues as to what the past was like. Whether it's a tree growing that still might be hundreds of years old, or Arroyo Seco. I was walking along that today and that holds a lot of evidence for the past. A lot of library research. Libraries are great for the history books. Old photographs, old paintings. Next. I do a lot of field sketches. I always have a little sketchbook in my pocket and try to draw birds, have some binoculars, take a lot of notes. That's an old map of the Sacramento River. So I have piles of this in my studio. Next. So going back to the studio, and I have my art table and I have all this material that I've collected for 20 years, and how do you start to make a book out of it? I have little idea sketches, just little thumbnail sketches that I try to get an idea for a painting. Next. I work up a rough sketch in pencil, and this is where I can start to flesh out some of the details. And these are great because I can send these to experts, and they'll tell me things like, this Maidu village, you made the houses too similar. You need to vary them. Next. And so in the next sketch, you can see I varied the village. This is the same sketch with color added. Next. And then in some cases, I carried these illustrations further and did very large studio oil paintings. This is a 40 by 60 inch oil painting, oil on panel of giant sequoias with condors coming to perch on the tops.